I'm not going to be upset if you...
I mean, I would hope you would be upset if I didn't like a movie that you like. Isn't that the way of the world? Is that the way of the world now? It's like, you don't like something that I like, so therefore it's some sort of personal... It's like a personal attack on me. How could you not like this movie? What is wrong with you?
Well, it doesn't really bother me. I'm confident in the things that I like, and if you don't get on that gravy train, it's fine. Everybody has different sensibilities. It's not it's like my son and I, we disagree all the time. He'll say, I think I showed him Black Sunday about a year ago or so, or Robert Shaw, about the, Goodyear blimp and all that. He was like, that's okay. And I said, that's a freaking awesome movie.
It's just okay.
Thought it was okay. And so occasionally we'll get into it a little bit. And so, so there's that, but it's okay. It's all good.
Right. I mean, hey, that's what we're here for. And
that's right.
On this episode of the Culture Cast, I am still your host, Chris Dashew, much to the chagrin of many. And I am joined by my good friend. You've heard him here before. He is oh my God, I'm going to butcher it. He is the home video correspondent for Movie Geeks United. Your friend and mine. No Otto this time. Just me and you, Adam. My friend and yours, Adam Long.
That is I. Yes.
So Adam, you and I are doing a bonus episode here about a movie that you had mentioned to me. Hey, Chris, have you ever seen this movie? And I said, no. So here we are talking about a movie that, we're going to be talking spoilers, but I want to say that. I mean, this movie came out in 1972, but I feel like at the top here, just saying we're going to be talking about spoilers because, unsurprisingly, this is a movie you should track down and check out. I'm just going to say it here before we even talk about it. Before we even talk about the movie, check this movie out, watch it before you listen, because we're going to spoil the living hell out of it. We're going to be talking about 1972's Robert Mulligan directed The Other.
Life was good to the Perrys of Pequot Landing. For 300 years they lived in this place. The generations were rich with love, and the most beloved of all were the twins, Niles and Holland. That summer they shared a secret life. In the apple cellar, in the nursery. In the night.
Holland, where is the baby? I'm getting scared, Holland. Something awful could happen. We can still play the game. She doesn't have to know. We could play it in secret. Ada knows everything. Look there, child. Think as I have taught you. Now. Imagine, Toshka, all your being. Niles, what is it?
For the Perrys of New England, terrible things began to happen that summer.
Tell me, what is it like?
It was a summer of secrets. Secret treasures. Secret places.
Come on, little brother.
But the most frightening secret of all is yet to come.
Where is Ryder? Tori needs him.
I think I saw him down by the park.
Thomas Tryon, author of the best-selling novel, and Robert Mulligan, director of The Summer of 42, present a chilling new concept of terror and madness.
Oh, my God, my
George,
God.
what is it? George, what is it? George, what is it? What happened? Oh, my God.
There have been all the others. Now there is the other.
Holland, where gravy.
So the film is, like I mentioned, directed by Robert Mulligan. It's written by Thomas Tryon, based on his book of the same name. And it stars Uta Hagen, Diana Mulder, and Chris and Martin Udvarnoky.
I think.
Udvarnoky. And they play the Perry brothers, Holland and Niles, two brothers who get into some trouble, one might say, Adam. Some nefarious things are going on down at the old Perry Ranch. And yeah, so that's the setup. Adam, I've got to know why. Why are we talking about The Other, a horror movie from 1972 that, according to Wikipedia, had a quiet theatrical release? Whatever the hell that.
It was a very quiet theatrical release. Well, I discovered this film at the age of 7.
No fucking way.
I'm not kidding.
What is you like? Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, The Other. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was back in the day when networks used to run theatrical films before there were video stores on every corner, and now video stores don't even exist. So that really shows you how long I've been kicking around. But these were the days before you just had to wait until films were shown on television, and you had to make an appointment to do so. Well, I had this ritual when I was in first, second grade of going to my grandparents' house and spending the night on Friday night after a week of school. And a lot of times they would have the CBS Friday night movie going. And this was the CBS Friday night movie one particular Friday night. And I joined in probably about, a half hour into the film. And it's a slow burn. It's a very slow burn. But once you get really on its wavelength, and there was so much of what was going on that wasn't really registering with me. My grandmother had to explain the whole concept of split personalities and things of that nature. And I was utterly fascinated by this film. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, even at the age of 7. It blew my mind. And it was so chilling to me as the film went on and progressed, and that final scene where everything is transpired and you see you see Niles in the just staring out into the just staring out a window at the end of the film. I remember seeing that image at the age of 7, and it was just incredible, indelibly etched into my mind. And I can remember we went shopping the next day at a local mall, and we happened to be browsing in a bookstore, and there on the shelf was The Other, the Thomas Tryon novel. So I put 2 and 2 together. Hey, this was a book before it was a film. So it wasn't until years later that I actually read the novel. I was well into my 20s by that time, just to see how it differed. And there are some differences, minor differences, but it's a pretty faithful adaptation. I was amazed at how I think it's actually a textbook example of how to execute an adaptation of a novel successfully, I should say. So I was really, but I haven't, my history with this film goes even further than that. When I was, probably 26, 27 years old, I tracked down a collector of films. I was working as a projectionist at that time. And the guy sold me a 35 millimeter print of The Other for $50.
Oh, man.
I talked to my boss at the time, and I said, could I arrange a screening of this film for my coworkers? And this is in the mid-90s. This is around 95, 96. No, 1996. So you can think of the movies that were popular around 1996. So the kids and these were teenage kids that I was working with, just put a note up by the time clock, and I said, listen, surprise movie. I got a movie for you. Didn't tell them what it was about or anything. And I put that film together on the projection table and ran it for them. It was a good looking print. It was a little pinkish, but I was able to correct that with, you can actually take a soda bottle, a citrus soda bottle, and cut that out and put it in front of the bulb, and it will actually restore some of the color, which I found out. So I was able to get it
fucking
looking
tricks of the trade, man.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. That's the one and only time I've seen this film in the theater was when I projected it with my own print. And this was probably a 300-seat auditorium. And this was after the theater had closed down. It's about midnight, and I put it on. I was wild with anticipation about what these kids would think about it. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. Every one of them. They sat just at the edge of their seat, And the funny story about this is that one of the guys, our boss, had just bought a brand new sports car, and I can't remember what brand it was, but it was pretty expensive. And one of our coworkers was so freaked out by the film that he actually backed into our boss's car in the parking lot, exiting the theater when it was spooked by this film. So that was, unfortunately, the print was in the early stages of what they call the vinegar syndrome, where these prints will shrink up and they will eventually deteriorate if they're not kept in a cool environment. I moved into I was married at the time, and my ex-wife and I had just purchased a home, and I put it in a place to store it that wasn't an idea, and it actually deteriorated further, and so I eventually had to throw it away, unfortunately. But I have fond memories of showing the other in a theater. And that was, yes. So there's some personal stories that I have with the film. Over the years, I've had to diligently seek the film score. Was hard to find for years. That was actually issued on a CD in the mid-90s. It was paired up with the Mephisto Waltz because the score is done by Jerry Goldsmith. They paired that on a CD with the Mephisto Waltz. It's probably out of print now, but it's out there. I don't know. This film has just really, and over the years, I have put it on VHS tape. It was not released on VHS until late in the game, probably like 89. And I remember there was a trade ad in Billboard magazine when it was released. There was first time ever The Other coming to home video. And I ran it for a group of friends. And again, same thing. They broke up into a discussion group when the film was over with because they were trying to figure out what the hell they just saw.
Right.
And then one further story I'll tell about the film is that I was dating a girl who she'd grown up in Brooklyn. So she was big city girl and always reminded me that she was kind of cynical. I've seen it all, done it all, been there, blah, 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 blah. Well, I ran The Other for her as well. And she was amazed. She said, I have to give it to you that I've seen a lot of films. I've seen a lot of stuff, but that film is like unlike anything I've ever seen. So, like I said, the personal stories that go along with this film that are in connection with my introducing it to people over the years are almost as fun as the film itself. So.
Well, and I can 100% empathize with that because as someone who is a fan of a movie that I feel similarly to this movie, not forgotten, but it has its fans and its fans are vocal, yourself included. And ride or die for this movie, right? Like, I get it. And for me, that movie is Freaked, the Alex Winter, Tom Stern movie from the 90s. And that was the movie I was showing to my friends in college. And they were like, never seen anything like this before. What the fuck is this movie? I'm like, this is the pinnacle for me of like the kinds of movies that I'm into. And nobody has made a movie like that since. Not ever, they never will. And similar to this movie, right? Like there have been versions of this movie made. They mentioned them at the bottom of the Wikipedia page. There's like 8 different movies that are in the vein of this movie. This is the best of all of them. This is it just feels like this is I don't know how to describe this other than when I was done watching this movie, all I could think was, how had I not fucking seen this? That was my ultimate takeaway because I appreciate a movie that gives no fucks, which this movie does not give a fuck. It does not bother itself with whether or not you as an audience member are going to be upset. Children die with wanton abandon in this film in ways that are not pleasant. A child takes a pitchfork to, I guess, the face, and then another child, while trying to kill a cat, eats shit into the well with the cat. And then the ending is, again, just beyond the pale of existence. This is, I can't even, this is a movie I can't even believe I've never had anybody else tell me about, Adam. It's shocking to me.
Well,
I get
I'm
it.
so glad.
I not only get the appeal and get why this movie would resonate with you, but I also understand why, doing the research about it, it resonated with someone like Ebert, who I guess was as big of a fan of this movie as anybody else was who was a fan of this movie, which, having someone like Ebert, my feelings on him aside, in your camp championing your movie is not in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that's not something to sneeze at. I mean, Roger Ebert saying this movie is great and then going on Twitter when Chris passed away and he was like, hey, here's a tribute to this child actor who was in nothing else, effectively. Like That's not something to be taken lightly. I don't feel.
That's true. And I think, and talking about child actors, I think that's one of the reasons why this film is so effective, because Robert Mulligan was a master at working with young actors. He was so good with that, as evidenced with To Kill a Mockingbird, and then, of course, The Summer of 42, which is another film that I'm a huge fan of. And I reunited the cast from that film for a 50th anniversary reunion that's on YouTube if anybody's interested in seeing. It was so just gobsmacked that I was able to pull that off. And then this film following the next year, and then he ended his career with The Man in the Moon, which was Reese Witherspoon's film debut, which is another beautiful film about coming of age that I think is terrific. So he was a master at working with, and Neil Patrick Harris is in another one of his films called Clara's Heart with Whoopi Goldberg. That's another Robert Mulligan. So yeah.
And I've never seen To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a problem. And I've never read the book either. It's something that I would want to read the book and then watch the movie. Because again, it's not like I don't know how important it is to American literature, and I don't know how I escaped high school without reading it. Maybe I was in AP English and that was a honors English thing. And I read The Great Gatsby and they read To Kill a Mockingbird, whatever. But the thing for me about this movie, and you've already kind of touched on it, but it obviously bears a deeper mining, is child actors, for the most part, get the worst rap next to animal actors, right? Don't work with kids, don't work with animals. That's what they always say, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you need to act ever again if you're Chris and Martin Udvarnoky. Let's just call them the Perry brothers. The Perry brothers of the film. I don't think you need to act again if this is the performance the both of you are turning in. Like, what else is there to say, really, as a child actor in a lot of ways? Like, there's so much nuance to both of their performances. And again, it's so smart. The decisions that Robert Mulligan made are so smart, keeping them apart off screen, never on screen together at any point, is, again, it's just so smart that it allows us to feel the dreamlike quality that the movie is totally going for. Because that's what it feels like to me, right? I don't know if you came away with that same feeling, but there's like a I wouldn't say Grimm's fairy tale feeling to it, but it feels like it hews close to a fairy tale of the darker variety, the way they're originally told. It's a cautionary tale in a way, it feels like.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think one of the keys to the film is, and again, it's also, Tom Tryon, who wrote the novel that this was based on, and we can talk a little bit about his background here in just a little bit. But he knew how to tightly plot, so there's just a little bit of information is given out, just a little bit here, just a little bit to keep you off balance.
Barely anything, though, which I so appreciate.
Yeah, it's just enough. And that's what I have to warn people, especially modern audiences. When I introduce this film to people, I always say, now, if you've ever been watching, the old 70s television and The Little House on the Prairie or The Waltons turns up, this film is going to start out like an episode of The Waltons or Little House on the Prairie. It lulls you into a sense of complacence, but it just gradually adds layer upon layer of menace until by the final 15 minutes of the film, it's just reached a fever pitch. And you're just, oh my God, what are we watching? What are we witnessing here? And that's the trick of the film, is the fact that, you have to be patient. And I think modern audiences would, they might lose patience with it. And I beg people, I just give it a chance. You will get there. And I think you will be richly rewarded if you give yourself the time to go where it's going.
Well, and I mean, look, honestly think in a modern setting, and this is something that's come up a lot now, slow burn horror movies are a thing. I mean, Ty West has made an entire career off of slow burn horror movies, to the point where people don't like his horror stylings because it's like, it's just another hour and a half of nothing. And then the last 10 minutes, and, I get the sentiment, but it feels like a contemporary complaint of like, oh, just get to the action already. It's like, why not give us some world building? Even if this is a singular, self-contained narrative that has nothing else past it, build the world that these characters inhabit. Give us an idea of what we can expect and how you're going to subvert those expectations. Because you're the only one, as a filmmaker, who can do it. We are going to fill in whatever narrative gaps that are maybe missing for us. But I really appreciate that this movie takes effectively like a half an hour to get going.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only an hour and 40 minutes. It's not like it's 2.5 hours. So, well, there's still 2 hours left. It's like a half an hour to get to the point where it kind of starts dawning on you as an audience member what in God's name is going on. and here's the thing. And I was kind of curious. Again, you saw it when you were, a kid. So I wonder if you can remember when you watched it. And because I felt like I kind of thought that the other kid was dead throughout the whole movie. But I was like, there's no way that that's all that's going on here. Because the movie makes it very apparent that it's not just that. Because if it was just that, this movie wouldn't be nearly as interesting. So is there a moment in the movie where you kind of turned on to what was going on? Or when you watched it the first time, was it like, I don't realize that the kid is dead until they show the gravestone? Or are there moments in the movie that you've kind of picked out through watching it where it's like, this is an obvious moment where they're trying to really, signal, hey, by the way, he's probably not actually there?
Yeah, I can remember that it did dawn on me that especially after seeing the when he falls down the well, it pretty much was what he's the flashback sequence. I remember that was I figured all that. I think the concepts of the film that escaped me at age 7 was the playing of the game that the grandmother teaches Ada, the Russian mother, teaches Niles to play the game, and we get into that here in just a little bit. And that whole concept just went over my head at 7. I didn't get that. My grandmother was trying to simplify it, and I remember her saying, well, he's just got a split personality. He's imagining that his dead brother is still around, and it's a split personality thing. She didn't get into all the technicalities of this is a game that he's playing, and I understood that upon subsequent viewings when I was in my 20s, and it finally came out on home video. Then I thought, oh, this is even better than I thought when I see what's going on here.
Right. So best I can tell, and I want you to correct me or send me on the right path if I'm going astray. The game is his inability to process his brother's death, and Ada has given him what could be viewed as a coping mechanism, but I would feel is almost the complete antithesis of a fucking coping mechanism, the unhealthiest of coping mechanisms, which is not only is he pretending his brother is alive, but she makes the mistake, I think you and I would both agree, to reinforce that this is okay and say like, he's here, all right. It's like, hey, this is a bad idea. But that's what the game is, right? It's more or less just like I guess it's like a suspension of reality, a willing suspension of reality.
Yeah. Well, you mentally project. I think it's kind of a projection type thing where you mentally project yourself into another living being. There's a sequence where he imagines that he is a bird and he's flying and he's seeing everything as the bird is soaring over the hills and the valleys. There's this sequence that's beautifully shot by Robert Surtees, who shot many films, as we all know. And that illustrates that he's able to inhabit the mindset of whatever thing that he's pretending to be. And so he can do the same thing with his brother. He can, it goes beyond, I think, just, he's, like I said, mentally projecting himself into his brother's mind. And his brother, obviously, it's established that his brother had a little bit of an evil,
just a tad
mischievous character. And so Niles, I don't think necessarily is I think he's a pretty good kid, but Holland is the bad seed, so to speak. And so now that Holland's dead, Niles starts playing this game and projecting himself into Holland's mindset, and he starts doing the typical sort of thing that Holland would do were he still alive. So that's essentially.
So I guess the question that I have is Holland is the character of Holland, who we effectively see one time in the movie, right? Like we see him, we see these projections of him, which would be, I guess, in a lot of ways it's equivalent. And I'm not a fan of this movie, but it's a good example and a way to explain maybe to an audience member who's still listening and that hasn't watched the movie yet. This is essentially, in a lot of ways, Child Fight Club.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's great. Yeah, that's an excellent analogy. And I am a fan of Fight Club. I like it.
Right. Tyler Durden does not exist in the context of the story. It is a creation of the mind of Edward Norton's character. In this one, his brother did exist, but again, the question then becomes, what would Holland have actually done if he had actually been alive? Would he have been killing babies and doing all of these terrible things?
Yeah, probably so.
He dies trying to throw a cat down a well.
Exactly. That tells you where you're going with this character. And, he's obviously pushed his father down the stairs in the apple cellar. He killed his own father. So that's established. This is before Holland bites the dust himself. So, we pretty much established that Holland is he's just a rotten bastard.
He's about as bad of a child as humanly possible, right?
Yeah, he really is. And the fact that he dies, it doesn't end there. It just continues on because the grandmother has taught Niles how to play this game. And so he's getting into the mindset of what Holland would do in these situations, which is not necessarily a good thing. So that whole concept of playing the game, and I love how they illustrate that with several sequences. The sequence with the magician, and they go to the fair and they see the magician and he says, play the game and we'll figure out how he's doing these tricks.
Right.
And so that to me is, and then they walk out and he's like, he's a phony, because he knows exactly how the magician's pulling these tricks off because he's using Ada's technique, so to speak.
Well, and it's interesting because, again, you obviously have a movie where the entire film, for the most part, is the two child leads, right? And again, we kind of already mentioned this, stereotype, and I think it probably, if you've worked in the industry, it maybe is fairly deserved by child actors and animal actors, and everybody always says, but these were the good ones. It's like, these are the ones that are the exception that proves the rule. But it's funny that no point in this movie did I sit and say, this is a child. I'm watching actors, which I think, again, when you can get that lost in a performance of, again, two people playing different people, but also trying to hint to the audience, maybe there is more going on. That's not easy. This is such a balancing act. And, the script obviously is being written by the guy who wrote the book. So that is a massive help. But then he goes on to be disappointed by the movie.
Yes, he was. And I don't understand that. That to me is a mystery.
Same.
The script is so faithful to the book. I don't understand why you would be unhappy. And there is a documentary out there about the making of The Other, which a good friend of mine put together. Will become friends in the years since he put it together. Adam Zanzi's the guy's name, and you can get it on YouTube. And he went and actually visited the locations. He talked to everybody that's still around who was involved with the film. He did an excellent job. It's like a 90-minute video essay. It's
pretty good.
Together. Yeah, it's good stuff. And so he did some research on that very subject, and he couldn't even figure out why Thomas Tryon. He thinks that it may have been that Tryon may have been a little disappointed with Mulligan's directorial style, and that might have been why he was. And I don't understand that, because I think Mulligan just does such a great job of concealing things, as you mentioned. It's really trick. It's not easy to pull off, and I think he deftly does it with the way. And by the time the big reveal at about around the 1 hour mark, by the time that occurs, he's done a great job concealing what's really going on. And if you haven't figured it out by then,
right. When they're standing in front of the kids' graves, I look at the thing. It's like, okay, now I know where we're at.
Yep.
But to your point, I, like so many people, and I don't know where you fall in this camp, I am not the biggest fan of movies that are predicated on a twist, right? And I think that's somebody like M. Night Shyamalan and his ilk are to blame for that. And also my love of things like Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, all of the anthology stuff from the 70s and 80s and 90s, and even up until now. A lot of those anthology series have episodes that are predicated on a massive twist. And, the best kind of twist is the one that, it's a big deal, but it doesn't really change your enjoyment of the movie. It just helps recontextualize things. And we talked about this recently with something like The Menu and other kind of these big horror movies that have this kind of crazy twist halfway through. And this one has a pretty big twist, but it feels earned. I mean, again, I was watching the movie going, okay, if the kid is dead this whole time, fine. And it's going to work if that's the case. And that ends up being the case. And it ends up working because their performances are so kind of just enthralling that you get lost in their performances. And it kind of doesn't matter if the kid's alive, but the movie going, but he has been dead. And here is how he died. And now you get a better sense of what in the hell is going on. Because again, up until that moment, it's not necessarily clear that Holland is a, quote, evil child or the bad seed. But what he's doing when he dies leaves no room for the audience to have any interpretation other than this is the spawn of Satan. Like,
yes.
you know, I mean, he causes the death of 1, 2, 3, 4 people, or 3 people. And I guess, does a cat get away? The cat, I didn't see the cat go down the well with him. Maybe I wasn't paying attention hard enough, but 3 people die because of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or 4, I guess, including the baby.
Where's the baby?
Oh my God. Adam. when it showed the guy, the poor Italian immigrant who is totally going to take the fall for this. When I saw him with when I saw him with the barrel, I was like, oh no, like is this where this is going? Because again, like I think maybe they gilded the lily a little bit by having the Lindbergh baby thing in there, but I like that is the kind of cultural reference point that everybody in 71 could totally understand. Now I think that might be a little lost on people, unfortunately.
It would be. Yeah,
it totally would be. We're 70 plus years past it, but at the time that would have been a pretty big deal and a pretty obvious cultural reference point for everybody, right?
Yeah, and I think you can still get the essence of what they're getting at, because when he reads the book about the changeling, the story about the changeling to his mother, that's obviously foreshadowing that something nasty's getting ready to happen.
Right.
He's reading a story to his invalid mother, who's an invalid because of something Holland did. We'll say.
He pushed his mom down the stairs. Like,
yep.
I
can remember seeing that that was one of the earliest scenes I remember seeing in the film the first time when I was 7. And I remember seeing him push his mother down the stairs and thinking, boy, this is, I was immediately hooked. I wanted to see where this was going.
Well, and what I really appreciate about Mulligan and Tryon is like, she gets pushed down the stairs and then the movie just keeps going. It doesn't show the aftermath of it or anything. Like it takes a minute to get back to her and what's going on with her. And the same thing happens with the neighbor who dies from the heart attack. Same thing happens with the kid that dies. We don't see necessarily like, them finding the body and everything happening. And that feels like such a 70s way of doing it. And I really love that style of just not lingering, just keeping moving with the story and just continuing to bombard you with things, not like hanging on, the mom fell down the stairs and let's spend 10 minutes with that. It's like, no, we'll come back to it in a moment, but you need to understand that the plot is continuing and this is just part of the grand tableau that we're painting here.
Yeah. And the mother knows what's going on. She knows, but now she's put into a situation where she can no longer speak.
Right.
So, and she realizes what's going to happen to the baby when he starts reading the book about the changing, and the tears are coming out of her eyes and she wants to warn somebody,
right,
but she can't. She's completely powerless because of what's happened to her earlier in the film. It's just really nasty stuff in such an effective way. Another thing, you were talking about this film being kind of forgotten and off the radar. And that goes back to what we talked about in our earlier show with the Harry and Tonto. This is a 20th Century Fox title. That's why we're in trouble.
Hey!
Yeah, because this is Disney sitting on this property and they have no interest in reissuing this. It was previously issued as a Twilight Time Blu-ray, which I think it was Eureka issued it as a UK Blu-ray. I don't have that one. I have the Twilight Time, which is long out of print. It's going for about $100 now on eBay.
Boy, oh boy.
So you've got to, and it's really a nice transfer, and it has no extras, but it does have the score by Jerry Goldsmith, the complete score. The score that was on the CD was slightly truncated. This is the complete isolated score, and It's been remastered in full stereo. It's beautiful. Somebody actually ripped the score and put it all together on YouTube. You can actually get it. There's an original soundtrack file or something up there on YouTube of the other by Jerry Goldsmith. But it's one of the great Jerry Goldsmith scores that nobody really talks about. It just lends such an effective, it has these beautiful romantic themes at the beginning of the film, and then the music becomes more menacing along with the film as it reaches its eventual conclusion. I just think it's, and the editing and the cinematography, as I mentioned, the Robert Surtees, I just love how it's shot with the opening scene of the film is they're down at the pond or whatever, and they have these the cattails floating in the air and the way that it just puts you in this relaxed mood. You know, you have no idea where this thing is going by this opening sequence. And it's just beautifully shot by, like I said, Bob Surtees was one of the great cinematographers. And this is just, if you look at his resume on IMDb, you will be wowed if you care anything about films, the things he shot. And this was just one of the many jewels in his crown, I think. But, yeah, we can talk about Tom Tryon a little bit. I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, actor, novelist, and I guess just kind of traveling man about, like, it's weird. Like, his career in a lot of ways, like 72 is a big moment and then nothing else. Like, it's kind of what it feels like, right?
Well, he had some books that did, one of his later books, Crowned Heads, was an anthology, a book of short stories in a similar vein. And one of those stories is called Fedora, and that actually was one of Billy Wilder's final films. Fedora served as the basis for his 1978 film with William Holden, where he reunited with William Holden after Sabrina and Sunset Boulevard.
Sure.
So there was another Thomas Tryon, and the follow-up novel Harvest Home, which is also quite good. I've read that. It was made into a miniseries in 78 with Betty Davis, and it's done by Leo Penn, the director who's the uncle of Sean Penn, and it's pretty good. Not quite as good as the book. I think there was, because of television standards and practices, there were some things that they could include. It's a pretty nasty piece of work too, as far as like the nastiness of the story. Not.
I mean, it's a horror.
Oh yeah, it's
right?
horror. It's horror, and it's very similar to The Wicker Man. There was a thing going on which now. Well, actually, I would say it's a precursor to Midsummer, which draw a more modern reference. It's similar to that because essentially what it is, it's a husband and wife and their kids. They decide they want to get out of the rat race and they move to this colony up in I guess it's in Connecticut as, the same setting as the other. I think
it's like a Stephen King of Connecticut. What's going on?
Yeah. It kind of is. And essentially, it's a gradual reveal that things aren't all what they seem. And I don't want to give too much away, but by the time
because I'm going to watch it. Like at this point, I'm interested in a lot of like a folk horror-y stuff. So this sounds like it's right up my alley.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's up there on YouTube. I don't think the quality, it was released in a truncated VHS format. It's originally like 3.5 hours and the VHS was like 1 hour and 59 minutes. So they cut a big chunk out of it. So you want to try to avoid that one if you can. But I keep hoping that a Blu-ray will emerge because a lot of these TV movies are making their way to Blu-ray. So I'm hoping that it's a universal production. So the rights to that should not be in limbo. They should be easily obtained for anybody who wants to put it out on Blu-ray. So that would be a good thing. But yeah, I saw that when it originally aired, had not read the book, and then went back later and read the book. And it's pretty good. The book was a bestseller. It did well. The other and Harvest Home were really, both of them sold well as far as books.
Right.
And there was a time when the other was actually taught in literature classes, or so I'm told. That's kind of fallen by the wayside at this point. But no, Tom Tryon was an actor, pretty, fairly successful one. I mean, he was doing, I actually have talked to several people who actually worked with him and knew him, and they all speak very highly of him as a person. They said he was a sweet, soft-spoken person. You wouldn't have particularly thought that he had this sort of ability to tell such a story like this, or the ones that he did. But so he died fairly young. 1991, I think, of stomach cancer at the age of 65. So he didn't to be particularly old, but he wrote novels on and off through the years up until just a couple of years before he passed. And so he was a pretty sturdy writer, but I think his career was curtailed by a run-in with Otto Preminger on the set of The Cardinal. Otto Preminger was known for being just a tyrant as a director, and I think it's kind of come to light since then that Thomas Tryon was gay, and that was not acknowledged at the time. He was kind of a private person, but since then, I think some of his partners have let that be known. I don't think that's any secret. Anyway, Otto Preminger, I think, from what I understand, he sensed that there may have been that might have been the case, and he pounced upon him and basically victimized him and just really gave him a nasty time. He was the lead in this film, The Cardinal, and he was just a horrible human being, to the point where Tom Tryon was just so traumatized that he said, I can't do this anymore. And he didn't know what he was going to do next. And so but he had this idea for the other. And he sat down and put pen to paper, and then he promoted the hell out of it. You may be able to find some clips of him on talk shows in the days when they actually had authors on talk shows.
Right.
It's an amazing thing to think about, a writer being a guest on a talk show.
James Patterson's books sell themselves, okay? If he even writes them on his own.
Yeah, that's debatable. But anyway, so Tom Tryon promoted the hell out of this book, and that was one of the reasons why it took off. It really did well, and people were buying it. It was flying off the bookshelves, and so it was only inevitable that it would become a film, and 20th Century Fox bought the rights to it, and Robert Mulligan was flying high off of the success of The Summer of 42, which was one of the top 5 grossing films of 1971. It actually made more money in its box office year than A Clockwork Orange or Dirty Harry. Don't realize. So it quite well. And so he, when you're a director and you have a hit, you can pretty much choose what you want to. So he chose The Other as his next project. And unfortunately, it did fall flat, which was a surprise, because you would think that with the novel having sold so many copies, that it would just, that it would do well. And it came out in May of 72. I think they filmed it in late 71. Most of it was shot around the fall of 71, I think. And it just, like I said, it was quietly released in May, as you said, and it just didn't really do that much, unfortunately. But it has gained in cult status over the years. The people who, like myself, have encountered it along the way, they never forget it. They never seem to forget it. So it is one of those films that has a way of staying with you. And we could talk about the cast in this film. I think there's some interesting casting. I always like to remind people that John Ritter is in this film.
Boy, isn't he? A very baby-faced, very young John Ritter.
He is. Yes, he is in this film.
Like his third role, I think? Something like that?
I think so, yeah. He was doing episodes of The Waltons around the same time, I think, which is kind of in a similar vein.
Right.
So there was that. And Victor French, as you mentioned, who's the handyman, he was on Little House on the Prairie and then later Highway to Heaven. So he had a working relationship with Michael Landon. They were really close friends. And so he plays and he was a great character actor. He turned up in a lot of stuff. As did Lou Frizzell, who plays I think he's the uncle, I believe.
He is. Yep.
He's the one who says it's a great day for the human race or something like that.
Right.
At the beginning of the film.
Which is a great line. It was a great, just like dad thing to say.
Right. Yeah. But he's a great character actor. He turns up in Spielberg's first film, Duel. He's the bus driver.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember the guy who's, when the bus gets stranded and Dennis Weaver's freaking out, you got to get that bus out of here. It's Lou Frizzell is the bus driver. He's also memorably cast again in another Robert Mulligan film, The Summer of 42. We'll go back to that again. He plays the proprietor of a drugstore who there's the main character of the film is ashamed to ask for condoms. And so there's a terrific scene where he's trying to ask the druggist for condoms in a way that doesn't get too much attention. And so that's quite a funny sequence that's played to perfection by Lou Frizzell. So he was one of these great, he turns up in, just so many things. Capricorn 1, just tons of television shows. You'll see him in ISIS, The Secrets of ISIS, which was on Saturday mornings. And so he's just one of these great character actors that was in so much stuff. And he died, unfortunately, in 1979 of lung cancer. So he didn't make it very long either. I think he was like 59 or something. Yeah. So there's some, and then you have Uta Hagen.
I was about to say, like, the one and only Uta Hagen.
Yeah, the great acting teacher who plays the grandmother in this film, a very pivotal part in the film. You have her, and then you have Dinah Muldaur, another great character actress who turns up in so many things. Interestingly enough, she also played David Banner's sister in an episode of The Incredible Hulk, where he goes home to visit his family. So
interesting. I really like kind of how Uta Hagen's performance is in no way, shape, or form malicious. And that was what I was kind of expecting, was this kind of like, right? Like, because that's the expectation, is like she's teaching him this thing and he learns it, but she is, whatever her druthers are, she has them, and she's trying to get him to learn the game and like understand what that means. And it could have gone the direction of there's something nefarious here, but she is the one who finds out it's nefarious. Unbeknownst to her, I guess that's kind of the thing I was wondering. with this movie and kind of your take on it, when you have these characters and there's a scene of her going, you know, oh my God, like he does not understand that he is doing this. Is it your interpretation of the movie that Niles at any point realizes what's going on? Because she understands what is going on, and she's the only one other than the mom who cannot verbalize anything.
Oh, yeah.
But again, like the way the movie ends, you have Niles, like you said, looking out the window in this very haunting shot with like a single tear running down his eye.
Oh, yeah.
What is your interpretation of that ending? What does that mean to you? Because I'm curious. I kind of have my own take on it, but what does that mean for the audience and the character by the end of the movie in your mind?
Well, I think that obviously you have Ada, the grandmother. She sacrifices herself in an attempt to end the life, to extinguish the life of Niles, which does not end successfully, as we just mentioned. And so Ada was the only one who had verbal communication skills, who knew the secret of Niles, knew what he was really up to. So with her death, and the mother can't speak anymore due to her accident that Holland/Niles caused earlier in the film. So with the mother being the only one who truly knows what's going on, I think, to me, the message I got was he's just going to continue going on doing what he's done. He can't stop himself at this point. It's, as she says, it's gone too far.
Yeah. I really love, because you've mentioned it a couple times, that kind of reading of the changeling story. I think that for me, it's one of the smartest parts of the movie because it informs the end of the movie, right? Like it informs that last scene where you're like, okay, so now he's beyond reproach. There's no saving him. And he maybe hasn't been, quote, taken over by somebody else, but he's let himself become someone else willingly.
He has. In the book, there's a scene at the end of the book where he's actually in he's actually been sent to the house, home for the criminally insane. I'll get it out.
Sure. Got sent up to Bellevue, as they would say on Barney Miller.
Yes. Send him up the river.
Yeah.
But he, at the end of the book, he basically, you get the sense that he's completely taken over by Holland. Holland has completely taken over him. There is no Niles left at all.
Right.
And so you get that sense at the end that's what's going on. So, and there is an allusion to that in the film because he says, there's a sequence where he says something about, are you Holland? He goes, I'm Niles. I'm Niles Perry. He goes, are you really? Or something to that effect.
Right.
Conversation that they have. But I'll tell you, one of the most effective sequences in this film, to me, it stood out as a kid, and it really still gets me as an adult. I just think it's so creepy and so effective, is right after she tells him he's got to stop playing the game. And so he goes into the parlor, and he's just sitting in there with the information that he's got to, just cut this out, got to stop it. And he literally cannot help himself. And so then he imagines that his brother's there, and he says, remember? And so they have this flashback to show you how the game started, where his brother was in the coffin, and he goes over to the coffin, and his brother had their father's ring on his hand, and his hand was swollen. He couldn't get the ring off, and he said, just use the garden shears. You can just take it off. It's okay. And so he's imagining that he's having this conversation, and there's nothing, no sound effects at all, but the ticking of the clock in the background. It's just so incredibly well done. Just the tick, tick, tick of the grandfather clock, and no music, nothing except the dialogue between the two of them. And to me, that's just a master class in how to effectively stage a sequence like that. To me, it's just amazing.
Well, and you mention it, like this movie is very bloodless. I mean, for a movie where a child gets drowned in a wine barrel, you see nothing. And that's kind of what, I was mentioning, about, they don't linger on any of this. The kid takes a pitchfork to the chest, face, whatever, dies. We never see it. We see what we could believe to be it happening in first person, but we don't see it. We see the mom fall down the stairs, but that's it. We don't see Uta Hagen running around on fire. We don't see any of it. And yet this movie is terrifying. And I think that, again, like the 70s are such a special time for filmmaking because everybody felt like they were using restraint where they needed to, but going for it where they didn't need to show restraint, they went for it. But with stuff like this, Robert Mulligan's not saying, let's just throw as much gore on the screen as we can, or let's show them something they've never seen. It's never even really said what happens to the baby. You have characters going and looking and seeing, but they don't show us. And it's so smart. It's just whatever it is we're imagining it's way worse than whatever the reality is. And the reality is terrible in and of itself, obviously, but to show such restraint is so smart.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. It's, like I said, I think a lot of directors could learn from this film if they took the time to watch it. Some of the ways that things are staged. I'm just amazed. And these are things that I would not have necessarily picked up on as a 7-year-old. I was more story driven then. I didn't pick up on stylistics or, directorial flourishes and things of that nature. That's just not something that I would have picked up on until I was well into my 20s. And then I would noticing stuff. Hey, this is so well done. This is just the way this is, put together here. And so I just think that Mulligan just really nails it. He gets the story told, and like you said, in a very efficient amount of time. He doesn't belabor the point. Like you said, you're in for just a little over an hour and a half, and and it's done and it's over. And you've got a lot to think about when it's all said and done.
Well, and to your point about, showing it to other people and them kind of sitting down and talking about it after. I mean, that for me is the sign of a movie that deserves my attention, is when people are willing to sit afterwards and have a discussion about it, as opposed to this was good or this was bad. Like that, to walk away from this movie and say that was good and that's it is kind of missing maybe the point. Because again, like, it's asking questions about identity and self-identity and in a lot of ways, like what it means to lose yourself. And also, I think in a way, it's a little bit of a rumination on how people process grief and loss. Because again, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, he just can't deal with the fact that his brother is dead. That's ultimately what this movie boils down to, is his inability to process his brother's death. And everything else coming out of that is what we see. But the agency that he has his own agency. Even if you believe Holland did come and take him over, he's still doing it on his own, ultimately.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. And the grandmother's concern for her and love for her grandson, her surviving grandson, which she says, he says something about, when she finds out that he's still playing the game, he says something to her about, do you still love me or something like that? And he goes, I love you more than my life, or something of that nature. I love you. There's nothing I love more than. So anyway, she has this deep, abiding love for the surviving grandson, Niles, and she's willing to get him involved in this potentially dangerous affair, which does turn dangerous on a psychological level. And so that all stems from her love for her grandson, which, so there's that. But yeah, there's a lot to think about. Yeah, I've had this multiple occasions, people that I've shared it with in my life who have just wanted to talk about this film when it was over with. They just wanted to discuss it for a good 5, 10, maybe even a half hour, something like that.
Well, and again, I mean, it leaves you with a lot of questions, but not in a bad way. It just leaves you with a bunch of questions as to, self-responsibility, what it means to grieve, what it means to, again, I've never had a family member pass away like this, so I can't comment on levels of grief and stress and how those manifest. Because again, this is, maybe people aren't being, quote, possessed or astrally projecting or creating a hallucinatory version of the person in their life that passed away, but there are people that do. That is a thing. And there are people that do struggle with, like you said, multiple personalities or split personalities, or I would think probably closer to something like maybe bipolar. Because again, multiple personality disorder is exceedingly rare and almost doesn't actually exist, at least the way the movies, the way that the pictures show it, as they would say. But something like this is playing in that kind of sandbox, but doing something interesting, because again, it's not just astral projection. It's also a dead brother who whether or not he has ever existed beyond his death is up to the audience's interpretation. And I find that to be so smart. And the novel ending with him in an insane asylum feels a little on the nose for if it had been in the movie.
I think so too. Yeah, that was wise for them to excite that. And I guess that was Tom Tryon who decided not to put that in there. And so that, that was wise. But, some people have criticized the film for saying it's too beautiful. And that I think that was one of Tom Tryon's raps against the film, was that it was just too beautifully shot. And, I think it's quite menacing, the way that it's photographed. I think it's, I would not say that. I don't get that. But yeah, he was just so vocal about his dislike for it and saying that it could have been, maybe it was the editing. I don't think it was well directed. And then there was talk that he might even direct it, and then he decided not to, or either the studio gave it to Robert Mulligan because he was writing at that point. There's a lot of confusion as to why Tom Tryon didn't direct the film, but I'm not sure that it would have been as effective as it was. Sometimes with a first-time director, especially a novelist, but then again, he was an actor, so he may have been able to pull it off. He had been on film sets before, so could have worked. Who knows? But I'm happy with the film as it stands. And
so such a weird complaint that a movie's too beautiful.
I know, yeah, and that is one of the complaints that I've heard, that it's too romanticized.
I think that works in the favor of the movie feeling like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does.
Again, maybe that's not the intention. Maybe Thomas Tryon wasn't expecting to write a modern Grimm's fairy tale adjacent story, but the way it's presented here, it really leans heavily into that. I mean, and again, it being shot in the 70s on film helps. It just does. There's something that's really magical about film shot in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, the craftsmen who were behind the cameras, like, as we mentioned, Robert Surtees and so many others of his ilk, they were journeyman cameramen. They'd been doing it since the 30s, 40s. They knew their craft. They knew how to do it well. And it's very evident when you see these films that are just shot with such a confidence, I guess you would say. And I just think it's I just hate the fact that it's a Fox property and that Disney, and it's one of the great, it's just right up there, as we mentioned, with the Harry and Tonto. It's the same scenario, that they're just sitting on this catalog of rich material such as this, and they won't even allow it to be reissued on physical media. They won't stream it. They just don't care, because you can't take this and turn it into you can't take the IP and do something with it. So it's not important.
Which, I mean, again, so we talked about this last time we were talking together. And I mean, look, there is a fair amount of cynicism in the industry, right? I mean, I think you went and saw Avatar, Way of the Water, right? Like,
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is more what Disney is interested in selling.
Oh, sure.
Right. And it's, it's like you said, yes, it is a shame, because to have something that is imminently franchisable is a hell of a lot more enticing than, having somebody come in and say, oh, I want to redirect the other. No, sorry, we have no interest in something like that. I mean, that is what we're talking about here. That is the level of, I guess, disregard that it feels like, especially with Disney. And I feel like it's almost Disney alone, of a singular focus on something so financially important and yet not creatively important or rewarding. I mean, again, I'm not going to say Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly and Michael Douglas aren't having the time of their lives in the Ant-Man movie, but like, come on. I don't want to drag Marvel, but like, it's oversaturated now, and Disney is to blame. Like, Disney and Marvel are to blame, almost singularly, at least for that aspect of it. And this whole thing with sitting on properties, and not just like, if it were me and if it were you, we'd probably take all of these and do something that would be a Fox streaming platform or part of the Disney Plus platform that is all of these kinds of things that are literally just sitting somewhere. Like, it's just money you're leaving on the table. It's just money you're not making, because there are people like yourself and like myself who, if Disney went, we've got Fox's back catalog here, would you like to see these on a streaming platform? Who the fuck would say no?
No, exactly. And, the sad thing is that when Disney does put something out on physical media, it's usually subpar transfers. You can just tell the extras are all electronic press kit variety type stuff. They just put zero effort, and they're just leaving money on the table, because there are people like myself who are huge physical media collectors who love this sort of stuff and would love to have some of these rich titles that we have from their history available to us, and we can't get them. And if they're not going to do it, then why not farm them out to another boutique label or something. They won't even do that. Last week, there was an announcement that Disney had signed a deal with Mule Creek, which is one of the boutique labels. But unfortunately, Mule Creek is known in the industry as having some of the worst transfers. The bit rates are so low on those discs, and the agreement with Disney was that they can only issue things that have previously been issued on DVD or Blu-ray. They can't dig into their catalog and reissue and put things out that have never been put out. So they're going to be limited, and they're not going to be able to do 4Ks. And it's like, what is the point? What is the point with all this? I don't get it.
I think ultimately the point is nana nana boo boo, we have this and you don't. Like, again, I know it's not that, but it feels like it. It's like, what are you gaining from not being proactive in releasing these things to people, or at least making them available to stream? Because I don't know where you would watch this, because you can watch a Spanish language version on YouTube, which is totally a thing. But to find the movie, you would have to go through some channels that some people may not want to, going and buying a $100 DVD or illegally downloading it through torrent websites, which, again, honest to God, if they're not providing access to it, what the fuck does it matter if you illegally downloaded it? I mean, that's, as someone who, again, my feelings on illegally downloading things are going to differ from everybody's. I think a lot of people, and you might agree, if you can't provide it to me in any other way, then fuck you, I'm going to download it and watch it. Like, I can't abide you not caring at all.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I am right there with you. And, you got to, if you'll give us a copy that we can pay for.
It.
Yeah, right.
But if you're going to release Wall-E on Criterion and call it good, folks, that's not enough. And it'll never be enough. And, I think that this was the unintended consequence of the Disney Fox merger, 20th Century Fox merger, that everybody was crowing about, me and you, and now we're all just sitting here like, yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Like, we were worried this was going to happen, and it's exactly. Like, yeah. Hey, but Predator and Alien are getting new movies. Okay. Is that the only 20th Century Fox property anybody fucking knows? Like, what universe are we? What universe are we in where it's like, you've got stuff like this, you have so many other things, Harry and Tonto as well. Harry and Tonto, a movie that effectively is being remade with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, like poorly, we might add.
Like, it's so strange, because stuff like this needs a spot for it specifically, like a streaming platform, like a Criterion channel, but for 20th Century Fox properties, or even the Disney stuff that they don't care about anymore. My God, how many Disney TV movies have no existence outside of maybe somebody who put it on YouTube from a VHS that they had in the 80s. Like, I have a hard time getting behind people that, again, I don't buy physical media, but physical media is a necessity. 100%.
Yeah. If you want the best quality possible, that's the way even if you're streaming stuff, you're not going to get the high bit rates. You just can't. There's no space. They're not physically able to do that. So
right.
If you really are a purist like myself, that's the way to do it. And so, and you're talking about the Disney titles in the Disney library, not talking about the 20th Century Fox stuff. People tend to forget the type of stuff that we were getting, 30 years ago from Disney, like The Doctor with William Hurt, or Oliver Stone's Nixon, or
right.
What's Love Got to Do with It? The biopic of Tina Turner with Lawrence Fishburne, that's and Angela Bassett. These are the kind of movies that Disney was financing 30 years ago. How times have changed.
Yeah. I'm not sure Disney cares about anything that's not Lin-Manuel Miranda written, or Marvel or Star Wars, either adjacent or specific. So, which is perfectly fine. But, again, like, it's a shame, because it feels like people like ourselves are screaming into the void, asking to have somebody just care for 2 seconds at a company where they have so many people who are working around the clock to do everything else but dig into their back catalog. And like we said, it's just money on the table. It's just money that they're not getting, that there are people willing to give easily $20-$30 a pop for this. And you know what? Maybe do like Warner did with the like pressed to own type thing, where it's, we're going to press it when you order it, it's not just we don't have thousands of these lying around, which also is a great option. Why not just open up your back catalog and make it where it's pressed to own? as if Disney couldn't afford to do that. Like,
Exactly.
again, like that's as a friend of mine who I podcast with who works for Prime Video said, the Amazon Lord of the Rings show is just a rounding error for Amazon. Like, that's what they spent on that show is a fucking rounding error for Amazon. They don't give a shit. Like, and ultimately that I feel the same way about Disney. It's this like faceless Hydra-like organization that, as in not the comic book Hydra, but like a Hydra of mythological creation. Because I have to fucking clarify now. But it's that same thing where it's like it's all encompassing, but yet all it is just like this faceless fucking comic book and Star Wars factory now.
Yeah, and they're rebooting Planet of the Apes. I heard they're doing another one of those. So there's that too. Yeah, it's it's really sad, and I know so many people that I hear about on social media and people who follow me on Movie Geeks Unite who are telling me they're clamoring for a 4K release of Con Air or Tombstone or The Rock, all these 90s movies that Disney is sitting on, and they don't care. They don't care.
Well, The Rock already got a Criterion version 20 years ago, so we're good.
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. I'm sure that transfer will pass muster.
We're good. Like, we're good. We're good now. It's, it's a shame. And I feel like whenever you and I get together, it kind of always comes up. But I mean, again, this is another movie that is 100% a candidate for re-release. I could see this on Vinegar Syndrome or Scream Factory or any of those boutique labels, and people would buy it. No questions asked. There are people that just buy them just because they don't even know what it is. They're just buying it because it's the new thing coming out. And they want to have the newest, hottest Scream Factory thing that they've never heard of. And this would be right up there in that camp of something you may have never heard of that will floor you, shock you, and will entertain you in a way that a lot of current media doesn't.
Yeah, and I think this film does have a loyal following. I mean, it may be a smaller following, but nonetheless, people who have seen it does have its fan base. There are a lot of people who are friends of mine on social media who love this film, who saw it when it came out and or have caught it over the years like I did. And so it does have its fans. And so it would be nice to see it maybe paired with that great making of documentary I just talked about. If anybody's interested, like I said, that's up on YouTube for free.
I'm going to link it in the description of the show because it deserves to be watched. I mean, again, like stuff like that, in my opinion, shows the dedication to something like this, to a project that you love, is going out of your way to go, I'm going to track people down and I want to know where you are, what you're doing and how this affected you and what's been going on with you since this came out. Because again, like the only people that are going to do that clearly are the people who like this and care because nobody else is putting in the effort. And that feels like us doing somebody else's job for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I was delighted to see it when I found out that it was happening, and because I posted something about the other on social media, and the guy who did it, he saw my post, and we weren't friends at that time, but we connected since then. And I think I might have done an obit on the death anniversary of Tom Tryon. I think maybe that's what it was. And he chimed in and he said, "Oh, I'm working on a documentary of the other, about the making of the other." And I said, "Whoa, okay, let's talk about this." So yeah, it was obviously a labor of love, and he worked really hard on it. So anybody who's a fan of the other or has seen this film, you definitely need to check it out. It's, like I said, a video essay, and it runs almost as long as the film.
Yeah.
About 90 minutes. So it's very, very good. We will talk right quick before we wrap this up, if you want to, about the alternate ending, because this film did have an alternate ending.
Which doesn't sound as good. Yeah, right?
Yeah, I don't recall this, actually, even though I saw it on CBS in the 70s. Apparently, there's a voiceover after they show his face in the window, and he says, "Holland, the game's over. We can't play the game anymore. But when the sheriff comes, I'll ask him if we can play it in our new home," which I guess is, and it was dubbed by a different child than, Martin or Chris Udvarnoky, whoever may have been playing the part in that scene. There's a different child actor but it was standards and practices on television. And so they were, I guess, trying to imply that he had not gotten away with murder after all. So, that kind of takes the edge off of the film. The original ending of the film is much more effective because it looks like he did get away with it and he's going to continue getting away with it. And that's where the menace lies in this film. That's where the true horror lies.
That's the scarier ending.
Right. Ada has sacrificed her life for nothing.
Which I love that. I love how nihilistic the ending of the movie is. And, it's funny because changing the ending, it feels like something that almost had to happen for TV. And I can't believe this was on TV. A baby getting drowned in a barrel of wine. Like, a lot of the things in this movie are shocking that it was being played on over the air television. My God. Something like this would have people up in arms today if it were shown on, NBC movie of the night. Like, can you it's a different time, but then you have an alternate ending that neuters the movie by hewing closer to the book, clearly, right? Because the implication is he's going away wherever he's going. And what fun is that? Maybe that's the happy ending, but that's not the real ending here. That's not how this works in real life, because people get away with terrible stuff all the time. It has nothing to do with them astral projecting their dead brother. So maybe people like a happy ending, but I'm a sucker for just like the bleakest of bleak endings. I really am.
Oh, I am too. And in some ways, I would say this film probably shaped my sensibilities in some ways, because I saw it at such a pivotal young age. This is when I was first starting to, see films that really influenced me as a human being. And your very formative years are when you're in your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade years. These things that you see, they kind of shape who you become as an adult in your worldview to a certain degree. And I think this film in its own way probably did. I loved the darkness of the ending, and it resonated with me as a child. I thought, boy, that was something. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could not stop thinking about it.
And I'm glad that you don't remember the alternate ending, because you might have seen, theoretically, if it was on TV, right? Like it would have been attached to it, I assume. So. Oh,
yeah. Later on, and there was a long stretch where I didn't get to see it at all because it was out of circulation. Like I said, it ran on CBS in the 70s, and then it went to syndication after that. It was in a syndicated package before it was on VHS tape. And like I said, it got a belated VHS release in '89, as I previously mentioned, but there was about a decade there from the time it left CBS to until it got a VHS release where you didn't get to see it unless you were lucky and one of the independent stations in your area happened to show it in syndication, which luckily one of our local stations in the town I grew up in, they did show it one Saturday night at 11 o'clock, and I was able to catch it again many years after having originally seen it. So that was the second time that I saw it. And then it came out on VHS, and I had the VHS, and then the DVD, and then the Blu-ray, which I have to this day.
So Adam, final thoughts on The Other. I give you the floor first here about a movie that has clearly shaped who you are in a lot of ways, which I think is, interesting movie for that to have been, but I get it. Like, I do get it.
I just think it's a really effective piece of Gothic horror. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's just so, the spell and it works, the way it works, it's magic by lulling you into a sense of complacency, and then, as I said earlier, puts layer of menace upon menace until it reaches its ultimate conclusion, which is by that time at a fever pitch. It's just an amazing, the way it's orchestrated, almost like a good symphony, I would say. And so I just think that the performances are really effective, and it's so tightly scripted. And like I said, extremely well scored and well photographed, and I can't say enough good things about the film, I have to say.
And, I'm going to echo everything you said. I always am really excited and humbled when someone comes to me and says, I want you to watch this movie and tell me what you think. Because again, like yourself, as someone who loves movies, as someone who loves food and other things, I'm always worried when I suggest to someone, oh, I love this restaurant, you should go check it out. I love this movie, you should check it out. And it's like, hey, I didn't like that. It's like, oh, yeah, I didn't either. I was just curious what you thought. Like, yeah, I wouldn't do that, but you get what I mean. It's like, you're putting yourself out there anytime you suggest something to someone.
Oh, of course.
And it's a little piece of you that you're kind of trying to share with them or tell them about. And, I appreciate that you brought this movie to me and wanted to have a conversation about it, because again, like you've said, and I'll echo everything you said, this is a movie that deserves a hell of a lot of a reappraisal by so many people. There are so many people right now that would be super into this movie. It is so much in the vein of other things that are coming out right now, other things that have come out in the last couple years. And it's a shame because like we talked about, there are bigger forces at play here stopping it from going into that next step of a legacy title that shows up in boutique labels. There's a lot of things stopping that and things that none of us will ever be able to control. And realistically, I think we could both probably agree may never happen because, again, those forces at play are much bigger and interested with much more money-making opportunities than this. That all aside, you can find this movie on the internet. You should find this movie on the internet. If you like it a lot, go and buy the Blu. But this is a movie that can be found on the internet, and you should check it out and then share with everybody else you know, because that's the only way that this is going to get any sort of reappraisal by anybody mainstream is a groundswell of people. And like you said, there's a fan base, however big, however small. A lot of movies from 72 nobody even talks about now. But we're talking about this movie, and that's important. And like you've said, everybody's head was in the right place. I think everything about this movie, when it sings, it really sings. And by the end of it, you are left emotionally drained, wondering, what did I just watch? So can't thank you enough, Adam. This was a real treat of a movie to watch. And yeah, a movie where a child gets drowned in a wine barrel shouldn't be a treat, but yet here we are. So man, that poster. I didn't talk about the poster. My God. Holy shit, man. Like, God, just that the look of the child screaming on the poster, looking into that barrel is just, you don't know what you're in for, but you know it's not going to be something pleasant.
Well, I bet you could guess that I have an original one sheet of that. And
I hope so.
I do have it. And not only that, there's a B-style French one sheet of that I have as well. And it's awesome because it has it has a hand, and it has the words "the other," of course, at the bottom. It has a hand, and one of the fingers, the ring finger, is missing on the hand. And the place where the missing ring finger is, you see somebody falling, as if somebody's falling onto a pitchfork or something. So it's
nice.
It's a B style. You'll have to look it up. My description is probably not. But for years, I imagined that I had just seen that poster. I thought, because we used to get these 16 millimeter film catalogs in the days before video stores. The only way you could watch a movie at home on your own time was to rent a 16 millimeter film. And they had these catalogs. And if you were lucky enough to have a projector in the home, you could rent these films and then ship them out to you, and you'd have them for the weekend and then you ship them back. And so The Other was one of the films in one of these catalogs that I had. We didn't have a projector, a 16 millimeter projector, but we did. I did have access to one of the catalogs. And so I remembered seeing this ad for The Other in there with a missing finger. And I thought, I must have imagined that. And then years later, I found the B-style poster. And I thought, nope, I remembered it correctly. So,
I'll have to look that up because, I mean, the base A-style poster is just, it's haunting. And and again, if you don't know what it's in reference to, it's haunting. And then if you know what it's in reference to, once you watch the movie, it's even worse.
Campaign.
Yeah, again, Adam, thank you so much. This has been a real movie that again, when my wife sat down with me and watched the last 15 minutes, even she was floored. And I had to tell her, like, I set up what was going on. And I said, this is where we are in the movie. And even she looked at me at the end of it and she was like, what the fuck are you watching? So that for me that's a success, because when a movie from 72 can floor you the way it did when it came out, and possibly even more so, because again, expectations are a movie in 72 is not going to hit like this. It's just, I can't help but thank you. So thank you so much, Adam, for bringing this movie to the show, because again, like, I'm with you. This needs more. This needs something. Like, it just, don't let this be it for this movie. Don't let it be $100 Blu-ray that you got to go buy from somebody on eBay, because that sucks. That really sucks. So.
Well, that's true. And I'm so delighted to hear that you liked it. And if you hadn't, it would have been okay. I would have been fine with that, because, it's different strokes for different folks, but it's always good to hear that somebody gets on the wavelength of something that's meant so much to me over the years. And anybody that knows me knows how near and dear to my heart this film is. And I've tried to extol its values over the years. And so I'm glad that some people have appreciated it, maybe at my urging. So.
Hey, you're urging or not, it's still worth checking out. So, Adam, when you're not here joining me talking about films that are both ones that you love and ones that I've shanghaied you into talking about, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me over at the Movie Geeks United podcast. We do a show once a month where we cover all the Blu-ray releases of the month, and occasionally we'll do the anniversary shows that I do where I'll recruit cast members or behind-the-scenes talent from some films that are important to me, and I'll try to, when an anniversary is coming up, I'll try to get those people together and have them share some of their remembrances. And you can find me on the social media outlets, Twitter and Facebook, all that stuff too. And of course, I do a daily death obituary I guess you would call it a remembrance. People think it's a little morbid, maybe, I don't know. But what I do is I will post daily somebody who passed away on this, and it's not for morbid reasons. A lot of people think that that's probably why, but the reason I do it is there are a lot of people in my circle who knew some of these people when they were alive, and they have personal memories that they will share when they see that it's the day of this person's passing. So I will do that on a daily basis. And some people enjoy that sort of thing, so you can find those there too. So.
I am one of them. I appreciate any time that you're highlighting people that, again, like you've said, I mean, it's not morbid. These people worked their entire lives in this industry, and they deserve to have a remembrance, even if it is just for one day. So, and with actors like Chris and Martin Udvarnoky, like they what spotlight are they getting shined on them? So, it's like anything else. People who work in this industry, if you're not working right now, everybody forgot that you existed, I guess, unless you pick up one of the movies and watch them. So I always appreciate that there are people out there like yourself who are committed to the craft of keeping film history alive. And especially, the unsung character actors, which it's mostly character actors, it would seem. So,
yeah, there's a lot of that for sure.
Yeah. So as for me, you can find me at weirdingwaymedia.com, along with this show and so many other shows like Mike White's The Projection Booth, the gentleman who brought Adam and I together, Father Malone's narrative-based Astounding Tales of the Public Domain. And hey, let's plug a show that doesn't get plugged very often. Let's talk about Goodnight, Mr. Walters, the Taxi podcast, because hey, if you don't know what Taxi is, you should, because, well, Danny DeVito is still working. So is Judd Hirsch, for that matter. That man is currently nominated for an Oscar, and those two men had a big role to play in that show. So that's definitely a podcast worth checking out. As for this show, culturecast.com, Patreon, all those places you can go to support us, but like, rate, and review on iTunes. That is what you can do to help us out without a single dime being spent. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. It is a pleasure as always.
Yes, I totally enjoyed it. This was a lively conversation. I had a lot of fun.
I'm glad to hear it. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.